Aaron Lutzi, the big guns are back here. Steve Holmberg, good to meet you, buddy.
I know. It's good to meet you.
You've been on the pod a number of times, but only with Aaron. This is our first time meeting each other, and it's
Yeah.
great to have you
I
back on
feel
the
like I've
pod.
known you for a long time, though. After listening to everything on Free Trail in here, I feel like we've been together, or
Yeah,
you've been with me. I
likewise.
should say that.
Yeah, it's funny too, and I've been reading your Substack since before you appeared on Second Nature. I think I just came about it on LinkedIn and subscribed to it early, and love everything you put out there. And maybe we'll touch on some of that stuff here today. Lutzi, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. I'm unjet lagged. I've got about a heroic dose of caffeine in me, and I'm good to go, man. Iceland was great, and I'm back on track, so we're good.
All right. So the docket today, Lutzi's got a galaxy brain. We're going to talk about the potential end of Gorpcore. We may touch on something that Lululemon just published, maybe an early indication of some burnout in the wellness department, something I kind of identify with. But we have to start with our delayed emergency podcast. Steve Holmberg, 17-year veteran of Nike. Last week, it was announced that John Donahoe was stepping down from the leadership role at the world's largest sporting footwear and apparel business. And he was being succeeded by Elliott Hill, a name I'd never heard, but who is somewhat of a Nike legend. Steve, get us started on this. What does it mean?
Yeah, sure. So Elliott Hill is a longtime Nike leader. Largely, I think 30 years he's been with the brand. And it's interesting, the announcement came out on last Thursday, and I think I heard an audible cheer from my house from everybody over at Nike. It was really interesting when I opened up that announcement. I literally, I think I was cheering inside. It was an amazing rally point. So a little bit of background on Elliott. Elliott, again, has been a longtime Nike person, largely being in sales in different geographies. The interesting part about him is he is a beloved person by everybody within the brand. He is a culture builder. He is a natural leader that people listen to and follow. And I think that's really exciting for everybody. I mean, it's been been a tough first half of the years with the rounds of restructuring into a ad campaign that was met with mixed reviews, and everybody's been looking for that rally cry to sort of to come together against. And this announcement, I think, is very much that, for not only internally but I think externally, is something that people are loving.
I wonder, there's so many think pieces now about what Nike did wrong. So I guess my question to you is, what is the job to actually be done? Is it as simple as just reading those think pieces of what Nike did wrong and just doing the opposite? Or do you think there's a different job that Elliott needs to do as he kind of steps into this role?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think there's a lot. We should at some point go into like the history of the background and how everybody landed here, because I think there's a long, interesting story about what this is. And I think the strategy that Nike had, while it's a good idea, I think it was hard and challenging to execute at the end of the day. And I think what people are looking for at the moment is they need to be starting to fire on not just one cylinder or two cylinders. They need all cylinders to start firing. And I think what he can bring to the table is a bit of that history and that knowledge of challenging times, of good times. How do you bring all of the departments together in order to operate rather than just one or two? And specifically, how do you get product and innovation starting to fire on all cylinders? How do you get marketing matching that at the same time? And then how do you start to sort of dial up going to more geographies and growing that business? And he's been able to touch enough of that I think he's a great leader for it. And that being said, his background is in geographies. It is in more of that sales side. So he will naturally perform very well there. But I think he's been around everything else long enough that he can bring in additional people to really help make that product start to run really well.
It's interesting having read your most recent Substack about, kind of brand. And we mentioned this on a previous pod. There was a Bobby Hundreds article kind of about the same thing, where brand isn't enough anymore. It has to be product. And that's where, kind of the little guys can come in and really scratch something out. So this focus to return on innovation and on to product that's where you actually do have to compete. It's not enough to be Nike anymore. Does that kind of track with where you're going with that article?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think Nike is a great example of that. You have to have both in order to operate, and to be brand and product. They do have to work together, and sometimes they swing right and left a little bit. And sometimes you're a little bit more brand. North Face feels like it's running a little bit more brand at the moment. Hoka seems a little bit more product. You got to be able to play where you need to play. But I think Nike is going to hopefully take that move to be able to build that product and make that happen. I think that's not having that product created some of the challenge that they currently have with the sort of direct-to-consumer model. In order to be a strong direct-to-consumer business, you need to have the product that draws consumers in there. If you don't have that product, that's your attraction to buy on the site, then you have to just drive, spend a lot of money in order to get those people into the business. So having that will help not only that DTC business, but the rest of the marketplace and compete.
What do you think about the challenger brands? Like, what do they do now? Because it was very clear how they got their foot in the door, right?
Yeah.
So what are people at challenger brands doing now, or what should they be doing more appropriately now that Nike's about to make a huge shift in their tactics, and what was working for these challenger brands to get this exponential growth might end up not working as well in the future? What do you think?
Yeah. So start your clock. I feel like there's 1 year for these challenger brands in order to steal share, right? It's going to take a little bit of still time as new leaders come in, and you've got a long product life cycle in order to bring a product to market. So in order for Nike to sort of start operating there, I'm giving it about a year as where I think they're going to be firing on all cylinders again. So for the challenger brands, now's the time. And whatever you have, what you think you can have and put into market that you think is strong product that's going to help build, again, that brand of performance for you, I would sort of push on that hard. And now's the time to steal share because it's going to get very competitive about a year from now. And then I would also focus, it's going to be potentially an interesting choice at a brand level a year from now. And so I think they're going to be product now, and then it's going to be a little bit more brand, because if a lot of brands are talking brands, you got to sort of play that same game a little bit. So I would definitely push the product stories and get people buying into the brand now. Create that loyalty to the brand that is going to make it harder for consumers to switch over, especially on the running side.
This balance between product and brand is so fascinating. I feel like we could devote an entire episode to it. And I know we've devoted segments of episodes recently to it, but I think we should talk about Elliott specifically here for a second. Did you guys see like the memes on the internet screen capping his LinkedIn profile and stuff like that? I just pulled it out. So to our listening audience here, his first role at Nike from 1988 to 1990 was as an intern as an apparel sales representative. So a 36-year vet, counting from 1988 to now. I don't know, Steve, one of the things that I've heard is that it's difficult at Nike. Like one of the things that maybe led to Donahoe's potentially, tenure that could be interpreted as unsuccessful is that he didn't come from inside, and that it's difficult for people to emerge into leadership roles who don't start from the bottom at Nike. Mark Parker is another example of this. Anything you want to say on that?
Sure. I think Nike has a very strong culture, and how they approach the marketplace, being the giant that they are in the space that they are, is a bit of its own machine. And coming in from the outside can be hard to understand how that machine operates. And because I think a lot of bigger companies that are from the outside that you would typically pull from are really using a lot of cost savings in order to help define growth and grow in the future. Where Nike spends a lot of time, it seems like, focused on top line growth and bottom line growth, and creating that brand and that essence and that feeling is really important to it. And so people that have been with the brand for long periods of time, sort of grown up through it, have sort of seen it, known it, and helped communicate that not only within the culture, but also externally to other consumers. And I think that resonates. I think people are looking for a little bit of what was Nike before and bringing back a little bit of that passion, that energy, that irreverence. And I think the people that grew up with it knew it. They were executing that. And it also came at a time where you guys have talked about this in the past, where it's the number of people at Nike and what they're doing and how they're actually are they helpful for the industry? Are they not potentially helpful for the industry? Bringing new ideas, et cetera. And I think what's been interesting to watch over time is back even 10 years, 20 years ago, everybody was playing multiple roles. Like people would go from a brand to product or merch, and people were gaining different experiences and had a broad sort of exposure to the brand and be able to take challenges and apply them to different functions. And it seems like more recently things have become much more focused. People know let's say a singular product very well, but they don't necessarily have that exposure to everything else. And because everything's become hyper focused within the brand. And so having somebody come back with that long, deep knowledge of multiple functions, I think will help be able to understand what everybody needs and help create those connections again. Because when everybody hyper focuses, you become siloed, where the beauty of the brand was that it was a matrix and people talked with each other. Hopefully this will bring back a lot of the talking to each other. So again, cylinders firing not all at different times may not be helpful, but firing at the same time, that's what's really going to move the engine forward.
This is something that I've heard from other Nike employees, that you sort of get into these tracks where you spend 2 years in a role and then they move you intentionally into a role that you're not, competent. I don't know if that's not the right word to say it, but like you go through this like process where you're learning other skill sets within the business. And it's sort of like a operationalized process with training up their employees. Can you just talk a little bit about how that looks?
Sure. And I'll talk about a much longer time ago than now. But it's interesting with a brand as big as Nike. It's like an elephant, right? And it's really hard to get the elephant to dance because it is so big and it's so hard to move. And so how do you get the organization to be flexible and understanding the challenges in the marketplace and adapting quickly? I believe that one of the ways that they can achieve that is actually by moving people around somewhat fairly frequently and in different roles. So everybody no longer becomes a domain expert. They become a brand expert, or they become a business expert. And so that they are able to constantly flex and change and adapt because they are constantly changing, flexing and adapting to what's happening with the consumer. And so I think that's a lot of the element of, I think that's what helped everybody move into different roles and get the company to be a more rapid, faster moving company than necessarily like the old GEs that were just stalwarts in the industry. This kept them a nimble company.
Imagine if you were only going to have a job for 2 years, how that would affect your speed to action on literally everything. Like, I better do it now or I'm not going to get my window. I think about that a lot of people that don't have a timeline in place. They can just kind of play it out. But if you know you only got 2 years to be the Red Bull athlete manager, imagine how hard you're going to go.
Yeah, totally.
Well, yeah, and you wonder how long of a tenure Elliott is viewing his leadership role at Nike. And you said that you could almost feel a palpable cheer in the town of Portland, where you both live, when this was announced. Even his photograph, he looks like a leader. Like if you ask ChatGPT to generate like the photo of a Nike executive, it'd feel like it would spit out Elliott Hill. So maybe, Steve, if you have any perspective on like who else would have been able to step into this leadership role at this moment for Nike, because it felt like it had to be somebody with a deep and rich history, like maybe Mark Parker comes back, even though he's, I think, the chairman of the board. Elliott Hill, obviously there's probably a lot of like a deeper bench of people who've been around for a long time, but it feels like the workforce has responded really well to this.
Yeah, I think he just seemed like the natural fit. It seemed like the perfect person who actually hadn't been in the role yet, but still been again a longtime leader, and it's like almost the aha of like, yes, that's it. So it doesn't seem like they're going to pull from the outside again. It seems like they need that internal side. The teams have been working hard internally. But there's been a lot of sort of shakeups and so on. And so just I'm not sure the internal would have been a potential challenge just because there have been that sort of shakeup, and just bringing in that external bit internal, because he stepped away for a little bit, enough to be that perfect person to be like, all right, fresh perspective, like fresh take, here we go. This is the new direction.
But he is coming out of retirement a little bit. Obviously, he already has a 30-plus year history with the brand, which means he's in all likelihood not stepping in for a decade-long tenure, right? Does it feel like a stopgap in the same way that Bob Iger kind of came back to Disney for what was supposed to be another 2-year tour of duty before he found his successor? Like, what happens next?
Yeah, it's a good question. I thought about that with John Donahoe as well, right? Like, how long is his tenure going to be? And that same sort of question applies. And it's interesting. I hope he has a good, strong, long run. It could be also he's a great leader for the group that's just below him to learn from, and help build together, help co-create, and see what sort of comes out of that. But at the moment, I don't know if anybody is paying attention. They're just so happy that that's actually there. And I think it brings up another interesting hard point for him, is that there has been such a positive reaction. Expectations are really high. And so that becomes a very hard thing to live up to, because the whole company doesn't ride on one person. But it sort of feels like it based on the media that we're seeing at the moment. And so that's going to be a challenging one for him to manage.
I wonder what Nike's HR team is thinking about right now. Like, does it make sense? Obviously, it worked quite well to, play the hits, bring back the MVPs from our last big run. Do you think that their team is now looking at, hey, who have we parted ways with in the last 6 years, and who can we pull back in? Are they, do you think, looking for, to bring back some of the big names that help them get to where they are?
Or who is the talented tech rep that in 2065 is going to assume the CEO role, right? Like, who's just coming in right now, the like 21-year-old hustler that's going to work his way up through the ranks like Elliott?
Yeah, I have no idea. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see.
All right, cool. Well, we don't need to spend the entire episode on this, but fascinating. So, Steve, if you have any closing comments on what this means for Nike, and I think in general, just like the importance of the CEO role, the lead executive, even if it is more on the culture and almost symbolic leadership side rather than on the operations side. I think for me, that's one of the things that's fascinating here, because on paper, Donahoe is like the operator's operator, right? Where Elliott Hill is a very experienced guy, but it feels like he's more going to be a cultural leader. I could be wrong in that interpretation, but I feel like that's an interesting thing to contemplate.
Yeah. Final thoughts. I'm excited. Again, I think it's going to be an interesting to see them come online in their full capacity again. And just, I look to the other brands at the moment that are competing. Now is the time to sort of to be there and in that space, and steal share if you can, or grow your business to be what it needs to be, and build your brand. The time's now, but it's going to be a fun one to watch over the next 2 years.
Lutzi, closing comments on Nike here?
Excited to have some more case studies to work with, and hopefully this case study is a super positive one. Like we said on the previous podcast, every brand has tops and flops, and we've seen quite a few from Nike that have been really positive case studies, and in a few cases not so good case studies, but all instructive and important. And this is going to be really fun to watch unfold.
Yeah, and going back to what I said on, I think, the last episode, it's all about the case study, right? Like Nike, what an incredible brand, what an incredible business, went through a flop, in the cycle of tops and flops. And now this could be the bottom and the beginning of climbing to a new top. And I think in that spirit, it's worth saying that individually we have tops and flops. I just pulled up John Donahoe's resume. Obviously, he was the president and CEO of Bain Capital for 6 years, where he grew that to being a incredible like powerhouse of a consulting business. He was the CEO of eBay for 7 years, the CEO of ServiceNow for 2 years. In all those instances, he was super successful coming into the CEO role at Nike for various reasons. It wasn't, similarly successful for him, but, I just feel bad, for somebody of his talent, of his, with his level of accomplishments to, be, leaving Nike with, to some cheers maybe in Portland, but obviously he's had a great career too, and we all have tops and flops in our lives. So shout out to John Donahoe, a great career, and hopefully we haven't seen the last of him, and he'll have a chance to redeem himself. Moving on, Lutzi, you've got a galaxy brain. Let's go.
Ooh, I've got some galaxy brain. Okay, here's a little something that I picked up in Iceland that I think we could just flip into the outdoor space. So free idea. And actually there's like 3 or 4 different approaches. You could do an individual version of this. This could be a free trail feature request. There could be a whole business here because this is based off of a business that I actually saw when I was in Iceland last week. So here goes. The business that I ran into is called Your Friend in Reykjavik. And it's basically a series of tours around Iceland to get you acclimated. And they do everything from like proper day tours to week-long packages to walking tours of Reykjavik. They do a food lovers tour. They do a cat walking tour because cats are big in Iceland. I don't know. You can walk with a Viking and get like the Viking history of Reykjavik. You can do a beer and booze tour for $85 that includes 10 beers, which is, that sounds fun. So there's all these different things that you can pay for this one-day experience to get acclimated to a zone. And that is essentially the business of Your Friend in Reykjavik. And there are extra bits and pieces that are tacked onto that, but that's the essence of this basic business. So what would this look like if you made a running version of Your Friend in Reykjavik? Lots of people travel for work and maybe they don't want to go to the hotel gym. Maybe they want to go run the local trails, but they don't know where the trails are and they don't want to run the trails by themselves. What would it look like to say, I'm in Portland, Oregon. I want to run with a local, and you could, for $49, meet up with a local at a specific spot like Forest Park or something like that. And they would take you on their favorite trail. You'd have someone to hang out with, someone to run with. They could fill you in on a little bit of the information about the city, give you tips and tricks around so that you could feel more acclimated in whatever location that is. And as a standalone runner, you could do that. If you're a pro runner, maybe your rate goes up just a little bit because, I would pay money to run to the top of Mount Tam with Debo. And then on top of that, well, actually, why don't you react to that? And then I have some upsells that I think we could also add into it.
Okay. Steve, I can go first if you want here.
Go for it.
Okay. So I'm just pulling it up now, but a guy I know in the trail running space, he runs kind of a media business called Borderlands, started an app that I think is trying to achieve this. And also, I guess we should say, Aaron, our galaxy brain from whatever it was a couple episodes ago, where I proposed Patreon for outdoor and action sport athletes. Somebody hit us up on LinkedIn saying they're building it. So it wasn't totally crazy.
I love that idea. That was a great idea.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll start that here next week, even though none of us need new projects. But back to what I was saying. My buddy Josh Rosenthal, who has started Borderlands, I think he's tried to start an app called Wilder, which endeavored to connect people for like social and group runs. And I do think this is an interesting idea in the same way that Uber connects riders with drivers, passengers with drivers. This would be kind of something similar of like, hey, I'm here for only a couple of days, would love somebody to show me around, or in general, don't feel crazy comfortable running on my own in the trails of a new or strange city. Obviously, there are a lot of people that have that feeling. It's something I talk to my wife about all the time. She just much prefers to run with other people for safety purposes. And so I do think there is a market here. So the question is just how big of a market, and are there enough people that are looking for a guiding service in order to justify building whatever the software app that would connect the runners with the tour guides. Steve?
Yeah, I like the idea. I want to build on the idea though, that because you're talking about a consumer to me who's traveling to a market, who doesn't know the market and is trying to figure out how to be active within that city or that location that they go to. I wonder if there's an opportunity to have almost like a fitness concierge that you go to. And so let's say people are traveling to Bend and they're like, all right, what trail, this is my level. What trail do I need to be on? And you're like, all right, this is the trail you would do. And they're like, all right, where should I go to recover afterwards? And like, oh, here's the best place to recover.
Yeah.
Oh, and I need to lift the next day. Where should I go to lift? Oh, you should go to the house. They've got the best situation. They'll set you up. But it takes all of that unknown out of it, but you feel like you're connected to that athletic community in an easy way. And then you may not have to have somebody running with you. You could guide, but it could be an easier, cheaper thing to be able to offer, but still provide those experiences. And you could have connections to those different services or facilities within that local market that could be really helpful. And you know more than the hotel concierge. It's like a true athlete's concierge.
Yeah. That could be sort of like a lead magnet for the entire progress or the entire project, right? So like, hey, if you just want to know where to run, where to eat, where to recover, where to lift, here's this thing. But if you want to engage someone to run with you, to lift with you, to recover with you, whatever, here are the different packages that we have. There's a Forest Park run. There's a, road running version. There's this, there's that. I also thought about some other upsells that you could do. So what if you, for a little extra, we'll show up with nutrition for your run. So maybe like a Camelback loaded with, little snacks and water and whatever. A special tour. So specific tours to maybe secret trails that you would never find that are like the epic trails. Pre or post run food and beverage stuff. So like, hey, beforehand, we're going to go to this coffee spot for 30 minutes and your breakfast is included. And then the last one was partnering with a local retail shop to line that person up with gear. So not everybody's traveling with all their running gear. What if there was a way to get them in a new pair of Hokas for the run or something along those lines? And then they're locked into that retail shop as well. So there's some localized partnerships. Now, the thing is, I think you could actually do all of this as a single person. I don't necessarily think you have to go crazy on the software side of things. Like, you could set up a Calendly link and you could set up a landing page and probably do 90% of this stuff and have just a little bit of income on the weekends if you wanted to just kick this off as a side hustle. You don't have to like do some giant network where you've got every single city, but somebody could absolutely do the Portland version, the San Francisco version, the Bentonville version. It doesn't matter. And it doesn't just have to be running, but I just figured given the audience here, that's where we could start.
That is the seed of the idea, right? One individual needs to do this in a place like Portland and prove the concept, and that individual could build an umbrella organization and contract with local tour guides in different trail towns around the country and around the world. I don't hate this idea, and it reminds me of a guy I know who I won't name because I don't think it's public yet, who has just purchased a run tourism business. And his whole thesis around this acquisition is that the cycling tourism business internationally is huge. It's in like the hundreds of millions. I was just trying to find it in my email because he sent it to me, but unsuccessful. But I think it was something in the neighborhood of $100 million are spent annually on cycling trips where you have a guide where they set up all the logistics of the hotels, the accommodations, the food, etc. And that passionate cyclists can just pay a single fee and go have a life-changing, beautiful vacation style experience. His whole thesis is to map that into especially trail running, because trail runners definitely do travel. And the model, I think, is probably just easier to copy paste with a trail type experience. So anyway, an interesting thing that is in the process of being built now that I'm personally monitoring. And in general, I think sporting tourism is only going to grow.
Am I blowing it by not offering that as a service for a super rider? Should I just be like taking people around the world and giving them life-changing experiences?
Yes.
For money?
Yes.
All right,
I think
I gotta go.
But the realities of that, Aaron, are that it'd be a very hard business to operate. It would be very travel intensive, if not people intensive, and managing individuals who can do the travel. You'd have to trust those individuals and pay them well for that work. So I don't know. It's not as easy as the software version of Patreon for outdoor athletes or our Uber of run ambassadors or of run tour guides. So anyway, I think putting together these tours is probably logistically complicated. Anyway, not a bad galaxy brain. Anything else you want to add there, Steve?
No, I'm interested to see you do it, Aaron.
All right, we'll keep our audience abreast of your progress there. If you're interested in mountain bike vacations, please hit up Aaron Lutze on LinkedIn. All right, next thing on the docket here, guys, the end of Gorpcore. This is something that was published in GQ that Steve brought to our attention. Steve, you want to get us started?
Yeah, sure. So Noah Johnson over at GQ put a stake in the ground, said RIP Gorpcore. Gorpcore's over. It's no longer a thing, and we've got to move on as a culture and society. And so, for those that are not familiar, Gorpcore is the term that people use of the trend of people wearing a significant amount of outdoor apparel, and you think of it as the Arc'teryx jacket, etc., and appearing, especially to be of the outdoors, but most of the time it shows up in the city. And so there's this interesting play at that happened, and apparently Gorpcore is over. And what I think is interesting about it is not necessarily that Gorpcore is over. Hopefully everybody will still wear outdoor stuff, or else I will no longer be fashionable. But what makes me really interested in this conversation is a lot of brands have done very well based on the strength of Gorpcore, and Arc'teryx being an example of that, where people are owning multiple Arc'teryx jackets that are all $300 to $500 a piece, and that has really helped bolster the outdoor business in terms of sales and additional people that are purchasing. But the challenge potentially is, as that goes away, and as people don't need 3 to 4 jackets, they only need the one. What's going to happen to some of these companies that have relied heavily on that aesthetic? And is that potentially some of the challenges that we're seeing in the marketplace, is because we're seeing not that core consumer that's leaving or doing something different, because outdoors is doing well. People going to the outdoors is increasingly happening, right? Like, and trails happening, and hiking's more popular than ever. But is it the Gorpcore going away, which is a sizable market? Is that just going to sort of suck some of the revenue out of the businesses here, and what that impact is? And so I just wanted to bring that to the table. I was interested in what you all thought.
Here's my take on it. If you were only using Gorpcore for aesthetic, you're out. If you are, getting lumped into Gorpcore because you make outerwear that kind of fits the aesthetic but is actually a high quality product, I think you're going to be fine. And the good news is that these jackets and outerwear and everything else, they're meant to last for a super, super long time. So when Gorpcore comes back around, you'll still have it probably.
Yeah, retro Gorp. I like it.
Yeah. You'd hope they'd last a long time. Those Arc'teryx jackets don't come cheap, tell you what. My reaction, Steve. So again, you mentioned the author of this article, Noah Johnson. Do you know him, Steve?
No, I don't know.
Okay, neither do I. I mean, basically, this reads like an editorial to me. He doesn't provide any facts or figures about the decline in sales. And as far as I've heard, Arc'teryx is crushing it, especially on the Gorpcore style product. I actually just released a podcast today on the Free Trail feed with Jean-Marc Dijon, who is the new VP of footwear for Satisfy, one of the coolest new running brands in the space that I think, has batted above its weight class in terms of its impact culturally, just given the size of the business. And one of the things we talked about, Jean-Marc spent 20 years at Salomon, was the legacy of the Salomon XT shoe. So this shoe won UTMB in 2008 on the feet of Kilian Jornet, one of the greatest athletes of all time, in my opinion, certainly the greatest trail runner of all time. That same shoe won the GQ Sneaker of the Year in 2019. So these Salomon XTs, and the last time I checked, it's been a little while, on Salomon.com, they sold 17 different colorways of the XT. And now their trail running footwear product has advanced significantly. So the Salomon XT isn't necessarily the best trail running shoe there is. So I would guess 90 to 100% of those sales on the 17 different colorways are for people that are wearing them just for lifestyle Gorpcore application. Of course, there was the recent example of Rihanna also wearing a Salomon shoe during the halftime show at the Super Bowl. These are now a couple of years old now. So if Noah is right that the trend has turned and the Gorpcore aesthetic is going to no longer be fashionable, maybe that might be the case, but we haven't, I don't think, seen that in the marketplace yet. I don't think we're seeing that reflected in the earnings of Amer Sports or VF or these giant outdoor companies. I know I personally subscribe to the Gorpcore aesthetic, although right now I'm rocking a Pendleton flannel. I've like with a couple Oregon guys here on the pod. I mean, I basically don't go anywhere without trail running shoes on because, I want to signal your boy, he's an outdoor guy. He's a trail runner, and I think there's a lot of people like me.
Well, here's another example. There was something a while ago, another trend in GQ called health goth. And it was this whole trend about working out in all black gear, which has got to be that's not a trend. That's just what you wear when you go work out. I'm sorry. So, there's a trend. Now there's not a trend. Well, guess what? Like most people still work out in black shorts or black shirt or whatever. Like this is, I think, kind of a silly article and a silly, like this trends thing. I just think it's ridiculous. Like, it's not like I'm not going to wear a warm coat to go outside in the winter. It's not like I'm not going to wear black shorts to work out. Like, what?
Yeah. I would say, I'm with you all, but the one thing I would say is if I was at some of these companies, I would be watching what other trends I could start to potentially plug into. So if you look at like quiet luxury, like how can we take that ultra bright Arc'teryx jacket and how do we start to subtly implant that into maybe some of those other trends that are starting?
What is quiet luxury?
So think of it as almost unbranded, like really expensive, really nice apparel that looks great, but is not necessarily high brand read. It's actually a very small brand read or no brand read, but people know based on the cut or style what it is. That are in the know. And so is that a play you can sort of, for some of these brands to play into? And I don't know how Cotopaxi would do it, but right. How do you make it quiet and be part of that trend is something to potentially explore for everybody.
Okay. You know, what's a great example of that? Valence, which is a sub brand of Arc'teryx. So maybe this would be a fun sort of, spur of the moment rabbit hole we could just brainstorm together here. Valence, for those who don't know, started as, I think it was called Valence by Arc'teryx for a while. So it was just sort of the lifestyle fashion version of Arc'teryx that used a lot of the same technical fabrics, but had a streetwear luxury fashion aesthetic to it. And then a couple years ago, they made the conscious decision to drop the Arc'teryx name off of Valence and allow Valence to be a standalone entity, even if they do, have shared operations from my understanding. And to me, that felt like a really interesting positioning and maybe even goes back to the balance between brand and product a little bit, in that they realized that there was a market for this quiet luxury type product that is basically unbranded, but still has, again, that very high quality, fabrics and textiles that Arc'teryx is known for. but the intentional separation between the two I thought was interesting to allow valence to kind of grow and be its own thing. Comments from the peanut gallery here?
It could be interesting that they're like now would be the time to dial that up a little bit and play that game, and maybe very well played from a long way out to make that happen. Aaron?
Yeah, you've definitely seen this quiet luxury thing coming, as the next trend, as it were. Again, I'm wearing a white t-shirt right now, so I guess I'm rocking quiet luxury.
I'm wearing like the most patterned flannel you can ever find on planet Earth. On that quiet luxury front, this is not a fashion podcast, but I just learned of the Row. I'm sure you guys know that brand, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like that's an example of this, intentionally unbranded, and I think they like don't even have an Instagram account. My wife was telling me about them. They're owned by like the Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen, I want to say, and they're like the hottest thing in fashion. And anyway, quiet luxury. Interesting trend. And yeah, who knows? Maybe Gorpcore. I mean, these trends do come and go, right? And it is in all likelihood, we will see sort of a swing with that pendulum, and maybe fewer people wearing trail running footwear and Gore-Tex jackets when they're just going to the coffee shop. But it won't be me, guys. I will be the last person dying on the hill of Gorpcore.
Same here.
All right, final topic before we get to BPC. Steve, another thing that you flagged and that I've seen linked to in a few different newsletters is this report that came out of Lululemon that I thought was pretty interesting and almost like maybe something that disrupts their brand a little bit. So it's kind of interesting that Lululemon would be making this or publishing this study.
Yeah, so Lululemon published the study that you're mentioning that talks about how basically wellness has become very stressful for consumers. And then I think, don't quote me on this, go check it, but it's 61% of people find the wellness routine stressful, which is a really interesting thing to be seeing. And I think it brings up the question, we have so many people talking about so many different ways to be eating and the ways to be healthy and ways to be recovery. And there's right ways and wrong ways. It's hard for the consumer to delineate what is right for them. And I think it creates this interesting dynamic where health and wellness has become toxic for that consumer. And what I appreciate about the article is it sort of brings it back to a few fundamental ideas of do things that make you feel healthier, be with people because people generally make you healthier. It kind of simplifies everything back again to what we should be focused on instead of people getting lost in the weeds and then doing nothing about it. And I thought that was an interesting one by them, but I was interested that they published it because it did kind of seem to go a little bit against it. But I think I think their consumer probably appreciates that and that they recognize that within them. So I think it's still a smart play. But yeah, what are you guys' thoughts?
It's interesting on here that there's a line that says 89% of respondents experiencing well-being burnout say that loneliness contributes. And I don't know if you guys saw this, but I was reading the Fit Insider today, and there was a big thing about how there are a bunch of brands raising money to sort of combat loneliness and getting people together in real life. And my Galaxy brand idea, also a solution. We should. I was
just gonna say, yes.
Let's go raise some money.
The anti-lonely run club, yes.
But that's another interesting study that came out with Pacer AI recently, is that they are saying, hey, Orange Theory is doing really well, Lifetime is doing really well, and those are actually building communities within the health and wellness space. And so that's kind of interesting to see that maybe that's why, is people are missing being with people. They've had enough of the alone run time.
What do you guys think about, obviously there are a ton of options out there now for wellness gadgets and gear and trackers and stuff like that. Is it the actual tools that people are burnt out from, or do you think it's the performative wellness that's out there that, people are talking about?
I think it's the information. I mean, Lindsay, you're the ultimate quantified self guy. I mean, how many wearables do you use? Like, what's your routine in terms of gathering and interpreting the information from your biology?
Well, right now I'm just splitting it between the Oura Ring and the Apple Watch, so I've got it pretty figured out at this point. I did have the CGM on for quite a while, and that was a really fascinating insight. I mean, I think it's great that there are all these different tools that we have access to, but I do think that just the nature of media and the internet, everybody is trying to share their opinion, whether they're right or wrong. And that's the thing too that's so difficult about wellness is that everybody's body is different. Your body reacts to certain things different. Some of us function better on 8 hours of sleep, 9 hours of sleep. And I even like when I'm teaching bike stuff, if what I'm teaching doesn't immediately apply to this person that's watching, I could get like an angry comment. I'm like, whoa, hold on a second. So I think that there's never like this is the one way to do it, and that can get really frustrating and confusing of how should I eat, how should I sleep, what should I do for exercise. It is sort of different for everybody, and that's just going to breed lots and lots of confusion, I guess.
But like, for example, I stopped using my Oura Ring because I felt like it impacted my psychology to a degree that made it not worth it. Aaron, do you ever get stressed out about the metrics that you see when you open your iPhone in the morning?
Not lately. My actually, I quit my job in April and all my stats are like through the roof right now. Like my stress has gone down.
Oh my God.
Rate's...
See, when I quit my job to go all in on my thing, my stress went up 1,000%. And actually, maybe I need to get back on the Oura Ring because for God's sake, I actually listened to a podcast recently that said healthy founders create healthy businesses. And I need personally to recommit and reinvest in my own health, mentally, physically, etc. Because like I said, there has been nothing that has deteriorated my health more than going all in.
Yeah. There was some study out there too that was like if you are fit and you have like a wellness or a fitness routine, you actually make more money in your job. I don't know what the correlation was exactly. I'll have to dig for this one, but there was something that was like the healthier you are, the actually more successful you become.
Yeah. So maybe we can close this on, what does this mean for Lululemon? Obviously, a lot of their business is built around wellness and selling the idea of wellness to a consumer.
Yeah. To me, what I like about it is it opens up the aperture again, that they don't have to be just about yoga, or they don't have to be just about Pilates, or it's not about just meditation. Whatever you do that makes you feel good, that's what you should be doing. And Lululemon makes product for those people, right? Like whether you're a yoga or Pilates or a runner, I've got a product for you. What's most important is that you go do that, and I can enable you to go do that. And I think I like that broadening of the aperture and being there for that consumer, no matter who they are. So I think that's the positive I would take away if I was them.
Yeah, it's interesting. Maybe it's a return to the message of simplicity around wellness. Be around people, move your body, eat healthy, lay off the alcohol and cigarettes every once in a while, Yeah.
It does feel like a counter, though. If you remember back in the day, their bags used to be like, brush your teeth twice a day. They had like all these like sayings.
Yeah, it was like sweat once a day, brush your teeth.
It seems like a counter to that, but that's funny.
Now it's like only smoke one cigarette a year kind of thing, when it makes sense and you're whatever. Just kidding, guys. I'm just kidding. This actually ties perfectly to my BPC. Anything else you guys want to say before we close down?
I got to hear this BPC.
I'm ready for it.
Okay. I guess I'll go first. I feel like I should go last because this might take me a little bit, guys. Again, this was something, as I said before we got started here, is my all-time best personal BPC. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and set that expectation with our audience and hope they're not going to be disappointed. Last night, guys, I read this article in the New Yorker. Yes, I subscribe to the print version of the New Yorker. This article is entitled Joyride with the subtitle, Grant Peterson Wants to Preserve the Craft and Delight of Cycling. It's written by Anna Wiener in the New Yorker. And what it does is chronicle the cycling brand Rivendell. Have you guys heard of this company?
Mm-mm.
Mm-mm.
I'm actually shocked Aaron's never heard of this. Okay, so if you go to rivbike.com, this brand has been around for 40 years. It was started by a guy named Grant Peterson in Walnut Creek, California, so not far from where I live. Lucy, you're going to absolutely fall in love with this because it's squarely in the anti-brand philosophy that you always espouse here on the show. So I'm going to just read a couple excerpts here just to set the context, say a couple more things, and then I can shut up. Okay. So what it says here early in the article is, again, it's started by the founder, Grant Peterson. And it says, Peterson believes that the bike industry's focus on racing, along with competition and a pervasive addiction to technology, has had a poisonous influence on cycling culture. He dislikes the widespread marketing to recreational riders of spandex kits, squirty energy gels, and workout apps such as Strava. He thinks that low-curved handlebars contort riders into an unnatural position, that bicycles made of carbon fiber and aluminum have safety issues, and that stretchy synthetics have nothing on seersucker and wool. Quote, the whole purpose of pro riding now is to create a demand at the retail level for the really expensive bicycles, he said. He sees that the glorification of speed, personal best, constant quantification, metrics, leaderboards as discouraging to entry-level riders who might otherwise enjoy life with a bike. Quote, I would like to see the Tour de France only allow riders to ride one bike the entire tour, he said. Do their own maintenance, change their own flats the way that normal people have to. Racing would have a positive trickle-down effect instead of the way it is now. Bikes would be better, they'd be safer, and they would last longer. And the races themselves wouldn't be less interesting at all. So he's taking a very contrarian approach to the bike industry right now in a way that feels like it's really resonating with the consumer. It's kind of one of these businesses that has more demand than supply, and the people who buy the bicycles identify as Rivendell customers in a way that makes them feel really proud. And actually, I have another good quote on that here. It says, in the simplest terms, I think of bike. Wait, hold on. No, it's this one. Quote, it's not the bike, it's about the relationship, Richard Sachs, a master frame builder, told me. You're buying Grant. You're buying Grant's intellectual property and his 40 or 50 years of staying true to his belief system. Another, like, goes back to brand versus product, right? Like in this case, very, very strong brand in a way that people really, really want the product. So the last thing I wanted to say on this is very interesting company. They do only $4 million a year in revenue. They artificially constrain the supply. They don't really want to grow in the same way that Yvon Chouinard and Patagonia have mixed feelings about commercialization and growth. And then also critically, this guy Grant, pioneer, he's apparently been blogging for like decades, since before blogging was cool, in a way that builds his profile as the founder and connects with their audience and customer in a very interesting way. So in other words, he's kind of using content and media to drive demand and to build brand. And I actually listened to a podcast today about how the future of brands are founder led. Like, in other words, the founder is going to be more and more important to the success or failure of a business. And this is something that Aaron and I talk about all the time on the pod and offline about, the using content as customer acquisition for products. This guy Grant has been ahead of his time in that regard. Closing comment on this is that I feel like there is a big opportunity to do something similar to this in trail running specifically. I think there is a inherent exhaustion with technology, with needing to capture all the data, with needing to have a carbon fiber shoe, with needing to keep up with the Joneses on the newest fabrics and styles. If there was a brand created that went back to the roots like this, where they're selling flannel shirts and cotton shirts and saying, hey, it's all about the experience. And here's a simple shoe that will allow you to enjoy the simple act of trail running. You don't need the carbon fiber. You don't need the GPX watch. Just go be about it and do it, kind of in line with the Lululemon findings. So Galaxy Brain, let's start our simplified running brand Boys, do I have you on board? Steve, can you be
Yes.
the CEO, please?
Yeah, no, I'll be anything. I am in. I love the idea. Because I think there's something interesting happening with consumers and product. Because we've been talking about a lot about innovation recently and making sure that you're bringing new and exciting product to the marketplace. But that doesn't always have to be faster and lighter. It sometimes needs to be like that could be a helping grounding point. But for the everyday runner or the everyday biker, I think brands have gone almost too far, and they're providing stuff that actually that regular consumer doesn't need anymore. And I think this is a great example of all of those bikes brands have sort of shifted into that performance. It's faster, it's lighter, it's the blah blah blah. But they've in doing so they've lost that whole set of middle consumers that just love riding their bike, and that's a place that they can play really nicely. I think running has that same thing. There's a lot of faster, lighter, carbon plated footwear, but where's just the love of the run, right? And how does that play in? And I think there's definitely a space for that, and I think there's a lot of spaces that it could actually play.
Because you could tell that story very well in marketing material. The last thing I wanted to include here, because it feels like this was the universe calling me to start this business, even though we all know that none of us need new projects here. What it said is, in the simplest terms, I think of bicycles as rideable art that can just about save the world, or at least make you happy. And at Free Trail, one of our taglines is trail running will save the world. So it felt like this article was like, Debo, come on. You got to get back to the essence, get back to the core yourself. You got to put that GPS watch away. You got to just enjoy the fun, simple art of trail running. And maybe you need to start a brand around it. Aaron, any comments on this?
You know, when you were thinking about rebranding to Free Trail, this was one of the things that you and I talked about a lot, of the freedom of free riding and what that meant for running. And I think you've already got the brand, man.
Let's go. All right. Flannel shirts, cotton t-shirts coming.
We'll be warm
after that. But it is true.
Yeah. I'm happy to go next because it kind of ties to this a little bit. My BPC comes from Kyle from Raid. You're from the previous podcast. I cannot stop seeing his running belt in my Instagram feed. I like it. I know it's sponsored, and I like it anyway. And I love that. And I think why I love it and why I'm so interested in it in the moment is because it does feel like it actually solves it's not necessarily a faster, lighter answer. It's like a better fitting belt that will just, it takes away the distraction of that from your run, which is what you want to be focused on. You want to be focused on your run and that experience. And it seems like a distraction-free solution for consumers. And so I love that as an innovation and what he's doing there. And so I just wanted to give him a quick shout out.
The first founder on the podcast, Aaron had a great interview with him. So to our listeners who may be new, go back and search for Kyle Siegel Raid Research here in the Second Nature feed.
Awesome. That was such a fun. I had a call with him before we did that podcast, and I took like 2 pages of notes on what we were talking about. I'm like, yeah, this guy's got to be on the pod, and I'm so glad that he's inspired a lot of people, I think, and we were able to go pretty deep on, what it took to get from point A to point B. So I'm super proud of that one. Okay, my turn for BPC. This is extremely self-serving, but I don't care. It's our podcast. A couple months ago, we talked about, we were doing podcasts while I was on the road for this road trip across the country with my oldest son, where I was teaching him how to ride mountain bikes for a series that was going to launch on the Super Rider channel. That series has officially launched as of this week. So on Monday, I put out the first video in the series, which is called What I Actually Learned Teaching My Son to Ride. And it's sort of a roll-up of the entire road trip. What I'm going to do now that I've launched this one, I'm going to have like individual days from the trip that are kind of exploded out. But this one was more about what I learned throughout the entire trip about setting expectations, about setting them up for success, about the things I did right, but also the things that I did wrong along the way. I tried to be really transparent about all the times that I totally blew it on this trip. And so far, so good. We've got a really good response. And we're going to talk about this in a future pod. We've got somebody coming on in the next couple of weeks that I'm super excited about. And I was talking to him about this shift that a lot of creators go through, where first they're sort of feeding the algorithm with the how-to videos and really just like delivering on search-based content. And then you have to make this transition into more personality-based, like who is the actual host and what's important to them. And I'm going through this process right now. And one of the things he said to me was like, your views may go down, but your comments will likely go up. And that's exactly what I'm seeing right now. There's so many more people who are connecting with my content in a more meaningful way that I'm showing them the inside. And one of the things that really I think is driving that in the introduction to this video, I talk about how I'm taking my son on this journey, but then I turn around and talk about how my dad tried to get me into his favorite sport and I never really got into it. And so that was like what I was the most afraid of. And so many people have commented on that moment of like, oh, my dad did the same thing. And here you are trying to do the same thing, but hopefully with more success. And yeah, I don't know. I just think I was really nervous to put this thing out because I really thought, I've been so successful teaching people how to ride bikes. Are they still going to care if I'm giving them a little bit more context and more story? And, the views do look different. At this point, a couple of days off after a launch, I should be into the 5 digits. We're doing well, but it's definitely different. But the comments are definitely helping me feel like I'm on the right track. So anyway.
Yeah. I loved it. I watched it. I recommend everybody watch all the way to the end because you do. What I appreciate about the video is you were transparent of like, hey, there are actually things I would do differently, and I think that helps all of us that are facing similar situations, especially with their kids and growing up, and that is what connected the most with me. And so I appreciated that transparency. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, this is actually something that I've been kind of wanting to talk about on the pod specifically. But one thing that's a trend that's appearing in YouTube statistics are what is the device that the content is being watched on. And what's happening now is more and more people are watching YouTube on their TVs instead of watching it on their phones or on their computers. And so that's where this like story-driven stuff actually does a bit better. But for our listeners who maybe are just listening to this podcast, might I just recommend that you also go find us on YouTube? Because what a lot of people do with podcasts, they'll put it on their connected TV and then they'll just let it play and listen to the audio. They don't need to be always looking at the TV, but it's another way for them to get the audio without having to have a set of headphones on. So if you're not already subscribed to the Second Nature YouTube channel and you're not listening to us there, maybe this would be a great time to do exactly that.
Awesome. Go check out Super Rider. Aaron, maybe final thought here as it relates to this project and what you just said. One of the things you always say to me is what got you here won't get you there type thing. And it feels like you're navigating that process for Super Rider right now after building a great audience there. Like, what is the next chapter? And you can't rest on your laurels or keep copy pasting the things that have worked. You always have to constantly evolve if you want to get to that next step. What got you here won't get you there. It's definitely something I'm wrestling with right now on Free Trail too. Probably Steve is too, as he sets up his own thing too,
Totally.
huh?
Totally.
Let's go.
Yeah.
All right, guys, what an awesome episode. Holy smokes. We squeezed a
fun.
lot into 63 minutes here. Go read Steve Holmberg's Substack. When are you publishing next, buddy?
I'll be out on Monday.
All right.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Can't
every
wait.
Monday.
Aaron, you want to tease something we got coming up? Because it feels like we have a podcast that you're very excited about.
Yeah, well, we've got a really cool one next week, right? We've got the CEO of Wazelle coming on.
That was a good one.
We already recorded it, and it is awesome. It's so great. I actually just listened back to it as I was doing the video edit for it, and there's some really cool insight about her journey from really being outside the outdoor industry and now being CEO of, really cool brand. So we got a great conversation with Ariel. And then after that, I've actually got one of my old Red Bull homies to come onto the pod, and we haven't done the interview yet, but it's coming soon. It'll be up in the next week or two. And what's really crazy about this one is that it's someone from Red Bull, but it's from a division that you wouldn't expect us to talk about on Second Nature. And even more, Actually, I think both Dylan and my life and business is based on the insights that we got from this guy. I mean, this guy has caused us to make dramatic changes to our lives to develop something very successful. And the insights that he has, it's going to be an incredible pod. I always talk about this idea of cross-pollination. And what I really mean by cross-pollination is this is your ability to see the future by seeing the advancement that's happened in a adjacent category. And what our guest has to talk about, I think a lot of people are going to take a ton from it. So buckle up.
Yeah, and I think it's relevant to the end of Big Surf stuff that we talked about last week that we discovered in Steve's Substack. Another interesting topic we didn't have time to touch on today, but Steve, I'm interested in your thoughts on that one too. We'll save that for the next time.
Another time.
All right, steveholmberg.substack.com. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Secondnature.media. Go subscribe to both those newsletters if you don't mind. Jump in Slack too. I mean, things are going off there in the Second Nature Slack group. Come say hello. A lot of really interesting and talented people who have been jumping in there over the last week or so. Second Nature on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram. You guys know the deal. For Steve Holmberg, Aaron Lutzy, I'm Debo. See you next time.